started. Thank you everyone for coming tonight. My name is Alana Bergeson, and I'm the Executive Director of Mayan. I thank you really once again for all coming out between this very busy week of Labor Day and Rosh Hashanah, which is very quickly upon us. It's so nice to see so many of you here tonight as we gather here for the 18th annual lecture in memory of Rosalie Katchen, Aleha Shalom. Your presence is a testament to the imprint she has left not only on Mayan, but also in your lives. She is remembered not only for her knowledge, but also for the way she shared it with so many of you. Thank you for being here tonight, and in particular, thank you to our sponsors for this evening and to Congregation Shari Tefillah for hosting. For Mayan, this evening marks the start of our year of learning. As you saw when you came in, our course booklet, hopefully if it hasn't already arrived in your mailbox, it will be there within the next day or two. I would like to highlight a few of the courses which are starting this fall, particularly the ones which will be located in this wonderful building. First off, we will have on Tuesday evenings, Rabbi Samuels will be teaching a class called Shilot Tshuvot, responses, the literary history and historical legacy of legal genre. And also we will have Tal Atia teaching, I gotta tell you something, a look at the purpose of Agada in the Gemara. I would also like to highlight that Mayan will be starting our third cohort of our special Maya program. For this cohort, we are very excited to be partnering with Congregation Shari Tefillah. This is an amazing opportunity to commit 100 hours of learning to the fundamentals of Jewish literacy. This isn't just a class for beginners, but it's also even for those with more experience learning Jewish texts, and even especially since you probably still have some gaps you want to fill in, or just to really learn all of Jewish history from the start of the biblical time up until present time with 4 amazing teachers. We also have a variety of other courses which you can see in the program, in the course booklet. And one I'd also like to highlight is that after Thanksgiving we'll be starting a 4-week class which will be a live, interactive, remote learning class with Karen Spiro, who many of you may have known as a teacher at Maimonides and recently moved to Philadelphia, but we're excited to be able to continue learning with her. And this class will be looking at the story of Yosef, exactly at the time we'll be reading it in the Chumash. And I strongly encourage you to try this class out, especially if you're one of those people who prefer to spend the evenings in your pajamas. And also, I wanted to make sure you all were aware that this year Mayan is turning 25. On the evening of October 8th, we will be celebrating this big milestone. I hope you will join us at the Lars Anderson Auto Museum. Your invitation will be arriving very soon. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Rabbi Samuels, who I think needs no introduction here.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Shana Tova. I have in my hand a text sent to me by Aaron Katchen today by email from Israel. And he sends his regrets he can't be here in person, but his words can be here, and so I will read them. Good evening, and shalom from Yerushalayim. Thank you all for coming tonight to mark the 18th yahrzeit for Rosalie, Zichrona Livracha. As our family grows here in Israel, her loss becomes all the more poignant year by year. Her oldest granddaughter, Meira, whom she cradled in her arms, just entered a program that will prepare her for joining the army next fall. And her 7th grandchild, Yitzchak, is almost 8 months old and crawling into every available space that he could reach. It would have given her much pleasure and nachas to watch them all grow and prosper. Her legacy, to be sure, is a prime factor in their development into proud Israelis and committed Jews. We never tire of reciting the mantra that she chose from this week's Sedra, Ubacharta B'chayim, choose life, as it reflects so well the vitality that she projected through all the trials she endured. It would be well to note the context of this citation as well, living and prospering in the land of Israel. Leman tichya ata uzaracha. that you and your offspring may live. Though her life was cut all too short, she lived it to the fullest, according to the closing verse of the parasha, La'avat Hashem Elokecha, Lishma B'kolo, L'davka bo. To love the Lord your God, to listen to God's voice, and to cleave into God. She heard that voice calling in all her work and in community and family life, and it is our recollection of that which gives us strength to carry on in the path she charted. Earlier in the parasha, in the exhortation to tshuva, the promise of redemption and return to the land is coupled with the concept of God's mercy. V'shav Hashem Elokecha shvuotcha v'richamecha, and the Lord your God will restore your fortunes and show you love and compassion. The classical commentators gloss over the last word, v'richamecha. But indirectly, the Sfas Emes ties this return and redemption to Rachamim, understood as God's active involvement in human activity, and particularly in tshuva, which of course is the challenge of this season. In imitation of God, we are commanded to be Rachmanim b'nei Rachmanim, to perpetuate the legacy, Rosalie's legacy indeed, of caring for one's fellow human beings. And so it is entirely fitting that the topic for this evening be that very subject. And it's discussing my dear friend, Avi, one of the most compassionate people I know. Our friendship with Avi and Shuli is more than merely one of long standing. It is a bond that ties our families in ways too numerous to mention in the full range of life's experiences. Avi is a man for all seasons, and in this season of introspection and renewal, I am proud that he has agreed to speak to you tonight. With thanks to Maayan and to Ilana for arranging this evening, to Sharei Tefillah for hosting, and to Rabbi Samuels for conveying this message, and for everything he has been to our family. Thank you, Aaron. Wishing all of you a ksiva v'chatima tova, a year of happiness and health and fulfillment. And with that, our man for all seasons.
Good evening, everyone. If I'm a man for all seasons, I intend to continue speaking until spring. I'm hoping that the PowerPoint will be useful. There's a trade-off between turning off the lights or keeping the lights on and making it harder to see, and turning off the lights and making it harder to see as the eyelids close. So we'll try it this way, but seriously, if you think it would be better with the lights off, we can do that. I would also point out that although this is Sharei Tefillah, the PowerPoint is leaning slightly to the right. I want to thank everyone I would like to thank Maayan for inviting me, and thank Ilana for making all the arrangements. And very much appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this evening. I no longer recall where I came across the source. I don't know if I had a Bar Ilan CD in 1991, but even if I did, I don't know what I would have been looking up. It was the first week in February 1991, very shortly after, am I in the right place? Very shortly after Rosalie Aleh Shalom had her first liver transplant performed at the Deaconess Hospital, now the West Campus of Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. So let me just position myself so I can see what I'm doing. Okay. Brachot Yod Amud Aleph Amar Rav Hamnuna, said Rav Hamnuna, Mai dirtiv mi kechacham u'mi yodea pesher kabar. Who is a wise person and who knows the explanation of things? It's a pasuk from Kohelet. Pesher means meeting, Peshara means, it sounds the same, it means compromise. HaKadosh Baruch Hu managed to effect a compromise between Chizkiyahu and Yeshayahu. Each one said, the other should come to me, citing an appropriate pasuk to prove his point. And so, Ma'aseh HaKadosh Baruch Hu hevi Yisurim al Chizkiyahu. What did God do? He brought the Yisurim al Chizkiyahu, and then he asked Yeshayahu to come and be Mevaker Choleh. And then he quotes a pasuk from Malachim, which we're going to read in detail in a moment. And Yeshayahu came in, and in his capacity as a visitor of the sick, said, Kol amar Hashem tzvakot, this is what God has said, Tzav leveitcha ki meit ata v'lo techyeh. Get your affairs in order, for you will die and not live. I think you would agree that this is a rather odd gambit for a Mevaker Choleh. And I mean that as kind of an exegetical critique, because if you look at Malachim, which we will in a moment, you see that Yeshayahu came and delivered his Nevuah. It's Rav Hamnuna, who is changing that from a delivery of a prophecy into a visiting of the sick. And the question will be, among others, why he would do that, meaning Rav Hamnuna. At any rate, so said Chizkiyahu to Yeshayahu, my kulehai, why am I being decreed this terrible decree? Because he decided not to have children. So Chizkiyahu defended himself and said, I saw in Ruach HaKodesh that my children will be inappropriate. Amar lei, said Yeshayahu to Chizkiyahu, with the mysteries of the Almighty, why is it your business? And now I'll continue for a moment. What you're supposed to do, you do. And then God will take care of what God has to take care of. So you notice that God is referred to by two different names. The first one being Rachamana, which means the merciful one, and the second one, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Chizkiyahu says, Havli Barta, give me your daughter. Maybe it'll change my destiny. I'm sorry, but the decree has already been decreed. Amar so Chizkiyahu turns back to him and says, Ben Amos, that's Yeshayahu's father, finish up your prophecy and get out of here. I have a tradition from my grandfather's house, even if a sharp sword is lying athwart the neck of a person, he should never exclude himself from the possibility of Rachamim. And it continues, the Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Elazar both say the same thing. Even if a sharp knife is lying on someone's neck, one must never give up the possibility of Rachamim. And then it has a quotation from Eov, Hein yiktaleni lo ayachel, though he slay me, I will trust in him. That's the proof text of Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Elazar. However, it doesn't explain what it has to do with Beit Avi Abba of Chizkiyahu, which Rashi supplies. And he says, who is his Avi Abba? David, Shera'ayat HaMalach. David saw the Malach, Chabo Shalufa Biyado. And this Malach, whoever he is, we don't know at this point, is brandishing his sword. And it's the end of Sefer Shmuel. And even so, David lo mana atzmo min harachim. So, just to give you a roadmap of tonight's discussion, it's a discussion of Rachamim, mercy. The first part, what is Rachamim? Who grants it? What is the relationship between the donor of Rachamim and the recipient? Must the recipient deserve it? And if that is the case, how does the recipient deserve it? In particular, is teshuvah required? Is teshuvah even relevant? And when someone pleads for Rachamim, as we will see several examples tonight, including our pleas for Rachamim, which we say innumerable times this time of year, not to mention innumerable times every day of the year, what arguments are used? What is the sale that we are attempting to make that we ought to get Rachamim? And why is Racham always paired with Chanun, or more nearly so? Rachamim, mercy, and Chanun, grace. B, Rachamim as an essential attribute of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, essential in the sense of the essence of, and Rachamim as a goal, as the rabbi just read in Aaron's message, something that you're familiar with. I'm sure you've heard it many times. We are supposed to imitate God, imitatio Dei, damot HaKadosh Baruch Hu, mahu rachum v'chanun, af ata rachum v'chanun, just as he is gracious and merciful, so should we be gracious and merciful. How exactly are human beings supposed to do that? And finally, the idea of Rachamim as an essential part of the essence of the Jewish people itself. So now I will turn to the question which I'm sure is animating you most actively at this point, is what is bothering Rav Hamnuna? Now, I've deliberately phrased it this way to remind us of the classic question which is addressed to our most famous Parshan, who is Rashi. And the question one must ask of Rashi is, Vus art Rashi? You have to ask the question in Yiddish, which is the speech, the language which Rashi spoke, after which he translated it into Old French for his purposes. So what is bothering Rashi? What's the basis of that question? Rashi expresses himself in short declarative sentences which belie the complexity of what he's doing. He's answering textual questions, but he doesn't tell you what those questions are. And so what our job is to figure out what those questions are. Now, the relationship between our question about Rashi and our question about Rav Hamnuna is not incidental, because Rashi very often uses midrashic material to explain the text. Whether that's his only motive or not, the scholars can argue about. If I were to ask you to guess what percentage of the Rashis in the Chumash are based upon midrashim, what would you say?
85%.
70%. Okay, it's large. It's a good guess. A tremendously large amount. So in this case, Rav Hamnuna is telling us a story. It's a story that, quite frankly, when I was young and foolish, when I would hear a story like the one we just read, I would roll my eyes and shrug impatiently and wonder whether Rav Hamnuna really didn't have anything else to do. What is this with bigger cholim, and he didn't have children, and my grandfather told me, and what is that all about anyway? However, the intervening decades, many of them, have transformed me from a young fool into a considerably older one. And although I may not have gained much wisdom, I have gained a certain amount of patience, in particular to look at what it was in the text that people like Rav Hamnuna and Chazal found troublesome, and on the basis of which they answered the questions not as Rashi did with short declarative sentences, but with stories. And that will be the next section of what we're going to do. Now, the kinds of questions that Rav Hamnuna and others might ask are one of three types. One is lexical, having to do with other funny words that we don't know what they mean. Number two, narrative questions, meaning is there something in the story that doesn't fit within the story? And finally, moral/religious questions, that is to say, things that are said or happen which don't really fit with how we think they ought to happen. So in order to see what was bothering Rav Hamnuna about the text, we have to look at the text. So this is the text behind the text in Brachot. This is Malachim Bet, and it says that Chizkiyahu was born, he became king, then he was 25 years old, and he reigned for 29 years. Therefore, how old was Chizkiyahu when he passed away? This is not a trick question. 54 years old, which, by the way, happens to be how old Rosalie was when she passed away. Okay, and he was a good king. He abolished the shrines, he broke the matzevot, he smashed the pillars, he cut down the sacred post, he even cut down the Nachash HaNechoshet, the copper snake, which Moshe Rabbeinu himself had put up. Thanks. He's my insurance agent. But the Jews had continued to worship it as a cult, and they called it Nechushtan. He destroyed that as well. And it says, he was a righteous king who believed in God, and there was never a king like him again. And now we go two prakim on to the text which is directly related to the story in Brachot. It says, he became very gravely ill, and Yeshayahu came and said to him, Kol Amar Hashem, Tzav Leveitcha, set your affairs in order, for you will die and not live. And then, in the text of Malachim, what did Chizkiyahu do? He turned his head toward the wall and he prayed. And what did he say? Ana Hashem Zacharna Asher Talachti Lofanecha. Remember, God, I've walked before you and I've done the right thing by you. And he wept vitally. Now, what I'm going to do as we go along is put in green, just for color coding, I'm going to list the argument that is made. In this case, Chizkiyahu is praying to God. What is the argument that he makes? The argument that he makes is, I have been good. Okay? Nothing about sin. That we heard about sin before in Rabbi Hamnuna's telling of it, but in the text itself, this is what it says. And it says, by Yeshayahu had delivered his nevuah and left, and he was barely outside the walls of the city, when God came and said to him, go back, and he said, Ko Amar Hashem, Shamati et tfilatcha, I have heard your prayer, Ra'iti et dimatcha, I saw your weeping, and on the third day you will rise. And so God's response is, he cried that he was a good king, he was a good person, he followed God's word, and God said, I have heard your prayer and seen your tears. And that's all God says. And then he says something interesting. I'm giving you an extra 15 years, and I will also save you from Melech Ashur, who you may recall was pressing upon the Middle East at that time. And then Yeshayahu said, get a cake of figs, and they got one and applied it to the rash, and he recovered. I put that pasuk in because I'm a dermatologist, and I have an abiding interest in different ways of treating rashes. I have to say that nowadays, topical figs are not in fashion. Nowadays, people prefer apple cider vinegar. So now the response of God was, it says, I will save you and this city. Now, what is the reason why God will save? It says, V'ganoti el ha'yerazot, I will save Yerushalayim, Lama'ani or Lama'an David Abdi. I'm doing it for me and because of my servant David. Who is God not doing it for? Chizkiyahu. Okay, so now we turn to the questions which are not written anywhere. These are my surmise of questions, so feel free to disagree with them. By the way, when you unpack the questions, whether they're in Rashi or in this, that you think that Medrash is asking, you may find them compelling or you may not. And you're allowed not to find either the questions or the answers compelling. What do I mean by that? Rashi will sometimes inferentially ask a question and give an answer. And other Parshanim of impeccable pedigree who are more pshat-oriented, like Ibn Ezra and Rashbam, will not bother to ask the question. Doesn't bother them. Or they will ask the question and they'll give a totally different answer. But when you look at the questions and the answers which are implicit in the story of Rav Hamnuna, I think what you will see, even if you're not convinced or you don't like the questions or answers, a way of looking at the text which differs radically from the way we look at texts, one of which is we read silently. And we read quickly, and we miss about 98% of what we read. And that's not the way people read a long time ago, and it certainly isn't the way Rav Hamnuna read. Anyway, what are the questions? One, if Chizkiyahu was such a good king, why did he get sick? Doesn't say why, just as he did. Two, why was the verdict so harsh? Comes a Heftamaisa, he comes in to be Bavaka Chola and says, you're finished. And then he leaves. Three, Yeshayahu, the official interpreter of God's word, comes in, gives the verdict, and Chizkiyahu prays. Why? The verdict has already been rendered. What's he praying for? Four, what does he pray? Oh, he finally throws Chizkiyahu out in Rav Hamnuna's telling. And what does he say? I've got a tradition from Grandpa. Yeshayahu says, God says you're going to die, and he says, I don't have to listen to you. Grandpa told me otherwise. What kind of an argument is that? And finally, what is it with 15 years? You get 15 years. What is this, a Republican tax cut with sunset clauses? When did you ever hear of a nevuah with an expiration date? We're going to do your Mafter Yonah on Yom Kippur, right? Yonah comes and he says, "Oh, Arba'im Yom v'ninvei na pocket, you're going to be destroyed in 40 years," and everybody weeps and puts on sackcloth and ashes. And finally, then imagine Yonah coming back and saying, okay, God has repented his thought, you are going to be saved, you will not be destroyed. In 6 years you'll be destroyed. Have a nice day. When did you ever hear such a nevuah with an expiration date, and what does it mean, and why 15? So these are all the questions, some of which you can all begin to surmise the answer, but if we want to go deeper, then we have to go to the text, behind the text, behind the text. So I have been somewhat selective in a sneaky way of quoting only certain psukim from Malachim Bet, and I'm going to go a little bit deeper by looking at the successor of Chizkiyahu, who is Menashe. Ben Shtei Mesrei Shana Menashe v'Malcho. How old was he when he became king, Menashe? He was 12. That suggest any questions and answers to you? Why did Chizkiyahu need 15 years?
To have Menashe.
He needed to have Menashe. Was Menashe his oldest child? Of course he was. He was his heir, right?
Yeah.
That's who gets to be king.
Mm-hmm.
So, if he got sick at 39, how old was he when Menashe was born? 42. This is not a trick question. We'll get to the trick questions later. Okay. Now, Menashe, he was very bad. He did all the abominations. First of all, he rebuilt the Bama. Second of all, he made mizbachot to the Baal and Asherah and every idol that he could get his hands on. But that wasn't enough for him. He put the mizbachot b'Beit Hashem, right in the Beit HaMikdash, and the Cholz of Shemayim. And then, v'hevir b'no ba'esh, he immolated his son into sacrifice to God, v'onein, v'nichesh, v'yafsa'o v'yidonim, sutsei, divination. There's something almost like a caricature about this. I can almost picture a staff meeting where Menashe says to his staff, "How many abominations have I done today?" And they say, "7, sire." And he says, "It's only 2. We have time for 3 more before we knock off." I mean, listen, it's a litany of every abomination that he could possibly have reinstated, including some which Chizkiyahu hadn't even gotten rid of. So, again, what question are we edging toward answering? Right. No, in other words, Chizkiyahu, what was Chizkiyahu's sin according to Rachamim? He didn't have children, okay? Now, if he had a child at 42, is that a normal time to have children? Not today, then.
No.
By age 42, what were most men?
Dead.
Dead, exactly. So, therefore, if he didn't have a child at 39, he would have been praying. There would have been some indication that he had he did all these wonderful things, tearing down the Bamot, but he had made no arrangements in his own family for succession. Okay, so we know he was 25, Chizkiyahu, when he reigned for 29 years, and Menashe was 12, so Chizkiyahu, we know, was 39. He had the baby when he was 42. Now, the next part is, what is this legacy of Beit Avi Abba? So Rashi says, as we said before, that David HaMelech saw the malach with a cherub, saw the angel with a knife, and he still believed in Rachamim. So here we have this pasuk, which is directly relevant, and you all recognize it from Tachanun every single day. Vayomer David el God tzar li ma'od, I'm in great distress. Niplana b'yad Hashem ki rabim rachamav. Let us fall into the hands of God, who is merciful, but not people, who presumably are not. Okay, here's a bonus question. What was the sin that God was accusing him of and David was admitted to?
Counting the people's senses.
Counting the people in the census.
By doing that, he's
Yeah.
preempting
See, you shouldn't have professionals in the audience. I would have guessed Batsheva, because he was interfering with the order of the universe. What people are supposed to do is have children and perpetuate the universe, and certainly not fail to do so for their own personal reasons, however estimable they may be. Number 3, after Yeshayahu's verdict, why did Chizkiyahu bother to pray?
Not then, when?
Pardon?
If not,
Right.
at that point, you're not going to wait longer.
Well, of course, that's the last time to do it, but the question is, why would you think that prayer would be efficacious in that circumstance? Just hold the thought for a second. How can you counter a divine verdict with what Grandpa told you? Grandpa is not just Grandpa, Grandpa is David HaMelech, who actually asked for Rachamim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Rachamana himself, under those circumstances. And the 15 years is an explanation for, since this is all in his telling revolving around the failure to have an heir, that's how much time he needed to have an heir who was approaching maturity to be able to take over the kingdom. Okay, now 2 brief digressions before proceeding. One is the term kavshei derachmana. You recall that in Rav Hamnuna, in Brachot, he said, "V'hadei kavshei derachmana lavali." In the secrets of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, why are you involving yourself? So what does the word kavshei mean? Well, it means a lot of things. In its basic meaning, it means to press down and grade, as in the modern Hebrew word kavish. It's a road. So the word initially means to press and grade down, and that's how you get kavish. It also means to press your face into the ground and hide. How does it mean that? You may recall from Masechet Tanit, when the people were trying to get the people to repent so that the rain would come, they told them, divrei kivushim. So that is a metaphorical extension of pressing down a road into pressing your face in shame. In the PL, it means to press vegetables, and it also is the same, the word is kivshan, which is an oven. I'm not sure if it means you hide vegetables in an oven, but maybe. And kibush means domination, basically putting your boot on the back of somebody's neck. But the meaning which is relevant to us here are that which is withheld and secret, all a metaphorical extension of that which is pressed down. Number 1. Number 2, I have a certain professional insight, or at least I think it is, into what happens when you have something sharp opposed to somebody's skin. Since in my daily work, I stick needles into people pretty much all the time. And the question I would pose to you is, when I do this, quite often people will say to me in a kind of a confidential tone, you know, I really don't like needles. And I have to restrain myself from saying, I thank you for sharing that, since most of my patients simply can't get enough of that. Okay, but seriously, the question is, why do people not like sharp things attached or opposed to their skin? Now that may sound like a really dumb question. You would say, because it hurts. But it's not so simple. For instance, one of the stocks in trade of a dermatologist is an electric needle, which isn't actually stuck into somebody. It actually cauterizes people from the outside. So, if somebody sees one of those, they usually say, that's a needle. And I agree. But I say, but it's not the kind of needle you think it is. Because it doesn't actually go through your skin, it just touches it from the outside. And the response invariably is, oh, that's okay then. Does it hurt? You bet it does. At least not if you don't numb it. But what bothers people more than anything else is the prospect of having their external integument pierced. And if you're thinking about it now, which you may well be, I think you can sense what I mean. Anyway, so the metaphor that Rav Hamnuna used, afilu cherev chadam nachal tzavaro shel adam, is something which is a very powerful one and speaks to human experience in a way that conveys meaning in a powerful way. So I'm going to continue now. and look a little bit deeper at what Chizkiyahu had to say. Chizkiyahu's prayer was, please, Lord, I've walked with you sincerely, and I've been good and done the right thing. So the question I would ask is, did Chizkiyahu sin? Did he apologize for sinning? Did we even know that he was sinning? He certainly doesn't mention it. And the reason I'm hocking you a chinik about whether there's sin or tshuva is two reasons. First of all, if you think about it casually, you think, well, there probably is some connection. You're asking for mercy, and you probably ought to deserve it somehow. No? And this is the time of year when all of us spend a tremendous amount of time in two ways. One, saying, Hashem, Hashem, Kiel Racham V'chan and Erech Apayim. If you stay for Sluchas, you can do it several times a night. We do it again on Yom Kippur afternoon, over and over and over again. Hashem, Hashem, Kiel Racham V'chan. One. And two, the other thing we talk about is tshuva. Hilchot tshuva, you've all heard it mentioned. It's referred to very often that a fundamental mitzvah is doing tshuva or vidui tshuva. In his Divrei Yitorah wrote before Slichot, the first night, Rabbi Samuel's quoted Rav Lippenstein, Olav Shalom, discussing whether, in fact, it's just vidui or confession, or whether it's tshuva, which he thinks it is the fundamental mitzvah. So there ought to be a connection between the two. And the burden of my presentation to you this evening is to decouple the two. Not to say that I'm opposed to tshuva, of course I'm not, but simply to say that tshuva and Rachamim, both essential to this time of year in particular, are not the same thing. That is the argument that I'm trying to make. So, to continue, let us look at Tachanun. Okay, you've all seen this. This is the way it's generally presented. Can anybody find sin in this? Right there. Rachum v'chanun chatati l'fanecha. Okay? It doesn't apologize for it, it just says I've sinned. But it's more complicated than it looks, because what I would like to do is engage with you in a brief exploration of the anatomy of Tachanun. Because Tachanun, the way it's printed, is a bunch of words together. There's a little dash at the end of the first two lines, but it doesn't tell you where the various components of Tachanun come from. So the first one is the pasuk in Shmuel Bet that we talked about, where by Yomer David al God David said, I sinned, and I'm picking God because he's the one who has Racham. The second one is Tehillim Perek Vav, which has an extra pasuk at the beginning that we don't say. So we have that, and we have this. Rachum v'chanun chatati l'fanecha. So if the first one is Shmuel Bet, and the second one at the bottom is Tehillim, where's that one from? It was added later. And in fact, I just noticed this morning in the Rosenfeld Slichot that this Tachina, as he calls it, doesn't even appear in Siddur Rav Amram Gaon or Machzor Vitri. It was added somewhat later. In other words, the mention of sin in Tachanun is a later addition. Does that mean it doesn't belong there? No, of course it belongs there, because it's part of our living religious tradition. But what I'm pointing out is that the other references to Rachum and Chanun don't mention sin at all. For instance, look at Tehillim Vav. It says Rachum v'chanun chatati l'fanecha. That's the other one. Hashem al pi'apcha tochicheni. Don't in your anger, don't punish me. Chaneni Hashem, give me grace, O Lord. Ki umlalani, because I am weak. What kind of an argument is that? Well, it's not an argument of merit. It just says, give me mercy because I need it. And it says, Ki nefhalu atzamai, because I am trembling. And then it says, Hoshieni laban chastecha. Again, because of me, it's not about me. It's about you, because you are a gracious person. Now, here is a pasuk. Here's a statement. When do we say this? We say it every night in Maariv, and we also say it on Mondays and Thursdays at the beginning of, okay? That word yashchit remind you of anything?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's look at it again, considering what we've just been going over. God is merciful. He will forgive sin. And if you think about it, I never thought about it before, but I am now. What does lo yashchit mean? What does yashchit have to do with anything? Well, here's what it has to do. That what we are referring to is specifically what we've been talking about recently at the end of Shmuel Bet. When was Hashem Merachem? He was Merachem in a case, to repeat, where the miscreant David was guilty, admitted his guilt, accepted the verdict, chose the punishment, initiated the punishment, and then he asked for mercy, and even then Hashem was Merachem. And that's something that we say over and over and over again without necessarily understanding the full import of what it says. Yes?
I have a question. It goes back a little bit. When you were talking about, I don't remember the exact phrase, but Koshe Rachamim, and you were talking about all the different things of expressing that.
Right.
I want to offer a different interpretation. So it's not that you're down and you need Rachamim, but you're invoking Rachamim to withhold or press on the punishment.
Okay. That word kavshei derachmana doesn't refer to Rachamim. It refers to the mysteries of the universe that Chizkiyahu had violated in Yeshayahu's opinion. Well, let's talk about that afterwards, if you don't mind. So anyway, so let's continue. Let's look at some more verses from Tachanun that we say all the time. It says, Hoshienu Hashem, second line, V'kabtzenu min ha'goyim, bring us out of exile, L'hodot b'shem kachecha. Why should you do this? So that we can worship you. Ki imcha slicha, you are forgiving. Why? Laman tivarei, so you should be feared. Asay laman shemecha, because of your name. Again, for your name. Why should you be kind and solicitous of us and merciful toward us? Because of your name and because of the zechut of our avot. What is it not about? Us. It's not about me, not about us. Okay, now what is this with the name? Let's go back to Shemot Kitisa. Vayomer ani avir kol tovi al panecha, said God to Moshe Rabbeinu. V'karati b'shem Hashem lofanecha, and I called you with the name of God. And v'chanoti et asher achon, I will grant the grace and compassion and mercy that I will choose to. It's a difficult word, a difficult phrase. I will go over with you in a moment with what Rashi has to say about it, which says, Ulamdecha seder bakashat rachamim. This is how you ask for mercy. Af im tichle zechut avot. Even if you don't have it, you've used up your entire store of merit from your parents. Kaseder razeh sha'ater ro'elti. Havei melamed et Yisrael asokim. V'al yedei she'yazkiru lefanai rachum v'chanun. When they call me by my name, rachum v'chanun, merciful and gracious, yiyu ne'anian ki rachamai lo kalim, because I have an endless store of rachamim. God's name is rachum v'chanun. Names are not just arbitrary symbolic designations. They have to do with the essence of something. So what this pasuk is saying is, my name is Rachamim and Chanun, and therefore, when you call me by my name, you will find a bottomless supply of Rachamim. And Rashi interprets for Chanoti et Asher Achon, it says, I will give grace to whom I will give grace to, and I will give merciful. In other words, I will do it when I want to. So don't come to me with your tzidkus, because that's not relevant. If I will be merachem, it's because of my essence, because that's what I do. skip that. Okay, so now, in the time remaining, I want to spend as much time as I can finishing up the other aspects that I asked, of the questions I asked at the beginning. Rachamim as an essential attribute of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We say the Shlosh Esrei Midot over and over again, Kel Rachum V'Chanun. And you've heard the statement made many times when you pray. It should not be Keva, the way we actually do it, but rather it should be Rachamim V'Tachanunim. We should be asking for mercy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this actually happens to be, in a funny way, very, very much the same connotation of the words Rachamim and Chanunim as in English, as is adumbrated here by the two famous rabbis, Rabbi Merriam and Rob Webster. The definition of grace is unmerited divine assistance, and mercy is compassion or forbearance shown especially to an offender or one subject to one's power. Keep that in mind. We're going to come back to it in a second. And there are certain expressions that we use. There, but for the grace of God, go I. It's kind of archaic, but probably some of the older folks don't use it. What does it mean? It means you see somebody in an unfortunate circumstance, and you say, no, it's not because I am clever, because I am righteous, because I did what I was supposed to. It simply says, if it weren't for God's grace, I would be in the same position as him. And as far as mercy, throwing yourself on the mercy of the court. You've heard that expression, yes? When do you throw yourself on the mercy of the court? When you're guilty or when you're innocent?
Guilty.
When you're guilty. If you're innocent, you fall upon the justice of the court, if you think you can get away with it. But when you know that you have no justice on your side, throwing yourself on the mercy of the court has the same connotations as what we've been saying in connection with everything in Rachamim. Now, imitatio Dei, as the academics like to say, or Hidamot LaKadosh Baruch Hu. You've all heard this referred to. It says in As Yashir Zekeli V'Yanvehu, this is my God and I will enshrine him, I will glorify him. We don't know actually what it means. And one interpretation is Hitna'el Upanav Mitzvot, make a nice talit, make a nice shofar, make a nice sukkah, and so forth. That's one. But the other one is Abba Sha'ol Omer, look at the bottom, Adamelo, I will be like him. Mahu Rachum V'Chanun, Afata Rachum V'Chanun. Just as he is gracious and merciful, so should we attempt to be gracious and merciful. Well, that's a lovely sentiment, but it's actually a very radical conception for a very good reason. Because who gives mercy, as we've seen so far? What is the relationship between the donor of mercy and the recipient? The donor is all-powerful and gives mercy because he can and wishes to. So that's fine if you're asking for mercy from the Duke or from the Lord. What does it mean to give mercy or to grant mercy or to request mercy from another person? Now, just to go out of the religious context for a moment, this is the famous jurist who looks exactly like Brett Kavanaugh. Agree? Actually, that's Portia. And in The Merchant of Venice, I don't know if you had to memorize this in high school, I did. And I will not read it to you, except to point out that Shakespeare seems to have had a sense, I don't know if it was a poetic sense or if there is something in Christian theology which is equivalent to Hidamot LaKadosh Baruch Hu, but he says it's an attribute to God himself, and earthly power does then show like as God when mercy seasons justice. And as I've highlighted here, it becomes the throned monarch better than his crown, but mercy is above the sceptered slaves and throned in the hearts of kings. Who gives mercy? The king gives mercy. Very much in the same way as we understand it in our tradition, except our tradition asks us to give it too. And that requires some degree of thought. Okay, finally, Rachamim as an essential, as in of the essence of, attribute of the Jews. It says in the Midrash Tehillim, Shalosh midot tovot natan HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael, Rachamanim, Bayishanim, Gomlei Chasadim. That these are the three attributes of mercy. We are merciful, we are shy, and we like to be kind to other people. So this is something which is a troubling question, or can be to us moderns, or some of us moderns. Do nations have essential attributes? Fill in the blanks on any of these, okay? Now, don't laugh it off because people do it anyway. And this is a question of whether nations have essential attributes is something which has engaged many of the greatest minds of all. I'm going to finish with the Rambam, but he wasn't the only one. For instance, we have this gentleman here. This gentleman's name was David Hume, and he wrote an essay called Of National Characters. Now, this is purely show-offiness. I've read nothing of David Hume, but he wrote an essay on the subject, and this is one of the things he had to say. I have to suspect the Negroes and in general all other species of men to be naturally inferior to whites. In Jamaica, indeed, they talk of one Negro as a man of parts of learning, but this likely is admired for very slender accomplishments like Parrot, who speaks a few words plainly. So, given that life is too short for many things, I don't have enough time to read the rest of this essay, and it doesn't interest me. I know it's not fair to judge people anachronistically, but the only point I'm making is that people have really thought hard about the subject and are continuing to do so, and you can't simply dismiss it by saying that we shouldn't be thinking that way. Now, just to give you a less highbrow take on how nations think of themselves, this is how Americans think of themselves. Now, many of you are too young to remember cigarette advertising, but many of you, I'm guessing, do not watch sports as much as I do, and so you don't necessarily come across the Coors beer commercials. But there was one recently that I will not play you the YouTube video on, which shows a cowboy running across the plain and a gravelly voiced man saying, "There's a code out here that nothing can be taken from a man who has freedom." This is followed immediately. It's told in that gravelly, menacing tone of voice, which I can't imitate. Then there come motorcycle riders, and then burly white men in flannel shirts banging posts into the earth, and says, "Be true to yourself. Don't live someone else's life. Live your own life." And Coors Banquet beer. So this is the image. It's not the only image, but this is one image that Americans have of ourselves. And then, of course, there are the Godfathers. And I would ask you the following question. If you asked Don Corleone what a Sicilian is really like, I am fairly sure that he would not say Rachamim, Bayashanim, and Gomlei Hasadim. Many nations brag about being warlike and merciless. And I think it's actually very nice. And it feels real to me in my own life and in my own Jewish life that a nation has for a lot of thousands of years thought of itself, specific instances to the contrary notwithstanding, and you can enumerate them too, as Rachmanim, Bayashanim, and Gomlei Hasadim. So where does it say that it's an essential aspect of Jews? It says in the Midrash Tehillim, we won't go into it, there's a contrast drawn with the Givonim. You remember the Givonim? They signed a sneaky treaty with Moshe Rabbeinu, with Yoshua, sorry, and then Shaul abrogated the treaty and attacked the Givonim, and then the Jews sought to apologize, and they asked the Givonim, "What would you like us to do in order to make up the fact that Shaul abrogated the treaty?" And the Givonim said, "Take all the sons of Shaul and impale them." That was the answer of the Givonim. And the Medrash understands it, and as you see, so does Rambam. V'hagivonim lo min b'nei Yisrael hena. The textual question is, do you really have to tell us that the Givonim are not b'nei Yisrael hena? Also, it says no. What it means is they're not like us because they were merciless and we are merciful. That's the argument. We'll skip the part about the Givonim and just conclude with three quotations from the Rambam, from Hilchot Shuvah. Zehu darkam shel zera Yisrael v'libam hanachon. The way the Jews are is mochel b'leiv shalem u'b'nefesh chafetza. Whereas Ovdei Kochavim, claims the Rambam, are achzarim, they are merciless, and like the Givonim, more not like us. Here's the Rambam, Hilchot Isurei Biyah, V'kol mi sheyesh bo azut panim o achzariyut, v'sonei atabriyot, v'ino gomel and chesed, choshishim lo biyoter shema Givonim. You see somebody who claims to be Jewish, who shows no mercy, one should question his lineage. Whereas the Umah HaKadosha, Vayishanim Rachmanim V'gomel Chasadim, and I will give you the last one, Hilchot Avadim, who says the same thing, and he says, Hein Yisrael sheheshpia alahem HaKadosh Baruch Hu tovat HaTorah v'tziva otam v'chukim u'mishpatim tzadikim rachmanim him al hakol. The argument the Rambam is making, at least here, is that this is not to be anachronistic in DNA, but the reason if Jews are Bayishanim and Rachmanim, it's because of the civilizing, you might say, effect of the Torah and our way of life. So I'm not necessarily arguing the point because I find it very troubling. It's hard for me to think in these terms. But at the same time, it's very difficult to avoid the fact that this is a live question to this day, and there are people who will come down on either side of the question. I will simply offer the following assertion. Jews love life, Arabs love death. Some of you will find that statement deeply offensive. Others of you will find it self-evident. But none of us, can pretend that we cannot address the question altogether. And I think it would be fair to say that, although we may not talk about it, most of us have a sense that Jews as a group are more compassionate at our core. Now, I'm going to leave it at that. It's not for me to come to conclude that one way or the other. But since we're talking about Rachamim, and we're talking about how we as people are enjoined to be like HaKadosh Baruch Hu in giving Rachamim, which is something which comes from the giver and is not necessarily, not based upon the merit of the receiver, this is a challenge for all of us, whether we think it's our heritage or not. The night of Rosalie, Alea Shalom's final surgery, I found myself sitting in the lobby, one of the lobbies of the Leahy Clinic in Burlington, to which the transplant team from the Deaconess had moved sometime in the early 1990s. And I found myself looking at a number of large colored banners that were hanging from the ceiling, one of which said, rated number 3 in nephrology by U.S. News and World Report. And I remember thinking to myself, well, me, hey, would that I have the merit to be in a hospital that was, say, number 2 in gastroenterology rather than number 3. But leaving this bit of public relations hubris aside, it occurs to me that the following. A liver transplant is a very technical procedure. It's based upon sophisticated science and a great deal of clinical practice. But the degree of complexity involved in the knowledge to be able to perform a liver transplant pales in comparison to the complexity of the human drama which was taking place upstairs at that time, involving 3 people, 2 donors and 1 recipient, each of whom had a cherev chada munach al tzavaram, each of whom had a sharp knife opposed to their flesh, not a metaphorical knife, but an actual scalpel. And in each of whom it must have induced a visceral sense of dread, once again, not visceral in a metaphorical sense, but in the literal sense of the extraction of viscera or internal organs. In the case of the donors, this represented an act of mercy which could not be demanded of any human being. It could only be offered as a matnat chinam. As Rashi says in Ve'et Hanan, when Moshe Rabbeinu said, I pleaded with God, and Rashi says, Ein chinun b'chol makom ela lashon matnat chinam. It is a gift without merit. And he says, even tzaddikim who have merit do not rely upon it, because they don't ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu only matnat chinam, because Hashem said, V'chanoti et asher racham, v'rechamti et asher rachem. I don't owe you Rachamim. If I give Rachamim, it's because I want to. And I think, therefore, that in the case of the donors that evening, that represents as fine and noble an example that I know of matnat chinam and hitamot l'Hakadosh Baruch Hu, an invitation of the mercy that we ask of God. And in the case of the recipient, because a demand, regardless of merit, could not be made, then in that circumstance, it represented a very precise instance of what Rav Hamnuna said and what David did, which is to say that even if there is no reason to expect that compassion and Rahmanut will be offered, one can never exclude oneself from the possibility. But of course, as human beings, we don't always know it, but sometimes kavar nigzara gezerah. Sometimes the decree has already been given. Not every story has a happy ending, but on the other hand, not every story has to have an ending, because in a meaningful sense, a story doesn't end until you stop telling it. And that is one of the reasons, I would argue the most salient reason, for an event like this one. But there are other ways of continuing to tell a story. In the case of Rosalie Aleh Shalom, as her husband Aaron, whom we heard from before, there are 3 wonderful children, Yonatan, Medina, and Hillel. There are her grandchildren, 2 of whom are named Shoshana. One of them is a quite beautiful young woman who's entering 11th grade and shows a great deal of promise as a leader. Right now it's as a youth leader. When she enters Sherut Leumi or the IDF in a couple of years, who knows where that will go. And the other Shoshana is about 5 years old. It's a little early to tell, but she already shows a very striking, one might say, an aggressive interrogatory style. Again, where that goes remains to be seen by those who remain to see it. And so there are, the story will continue to be told because the names, as we discussed before, are not merely not arbitrary symbolic designations. I'm just going to continue and conclude by saying that I often visit Rosalie's kever. She was the first to be interred in the Shari Tzvil Cemetery. And her kever is only a few feet from that of my father, Shalom, who passed away at a much greater age 4.5 years later. So during Chodesh Elul and at other times when I visit, I stop over and say hello to Rosalie, and think about her, and I think about her wisdom, and I think about her ferocious competence with which she lived her life and raised her family and pursued her career. And I also think about her remarkable and sustained optimism in the face of difficult, fearful, and utterly unfair circumstances. Yehei Zechra Baruch, may her memory, as it has been for the last 18 years, continue to be for a blessing. And for those of us she left behind, as the new year approaches, I wish Shana Tova to all of us, and a hope that we may merit not to require mercy that depends upon our merit. Thank you very much for asking me to speak this evening. I'm grateful.